Does all this really make sense? Welcome to Jesse's Flying, and here on my channel it's all about installing the latest macOS on older officially unsupported Macs. But I got so many questions in the comments below the videos or in my Discord server. The link is down in the video description. I have this and this Mac. Is it possible to install Sonoma, Ventura, Monterey, whatever? And does it make any sense? Does it run as a daily driver? Is it slow? And so on. And so I decided to make some videos about that because there are so many Mac models. And if you have already seen one of my videos, I always recommend macOS Sonoma or Ventura on Mac models 2012 and younger. And so I decided to split that up into 3 parts. And if you haven't yet, I would recommend you subscribe my channel and click the bell for notifications so you don't miss the other parts. And the first part will be vintage part, okay? I just grabbed the very old iMac of my son. It is a 2002 iMac G4 that has not even an Intel CPU, and it runs officially macOS X 10.4 Tiger. And let's talk about that. And if you can still use it nowadays, and going up to the iMac 2011, that's obviously running macOS 10.13 High Sierra over here, which is the latest official one for this one. Can you still use those vintage Macs? Next part, second part, will be about 2012 and younger, and I start with the MacPros. So Mac Pro 2012, the cheese grater, and Mac Pro 2013, the trash can. Because especially the cheese grater, you can really update it with new graphic cards, more RAM, NVMe drives, whatever. And the third part will obviously be all other Mac models from 2012 and younger. I have a MacBook Pro here, 2012. I have a MacBook Pro 2016. There are some more MacBooks in between, and an iMac 2017, which is sitting behind the other one. So we can talk about all the other Mac models starting 2012 till 2017, which is the youngest unsupported Mac model for macOS Sonoma. Does it make sense? Yes, it's possible. What are the downsides? And what is the best macOS for your old unsupported Mac? So let's start with the vintage ones. So let's start very vintage, okay? That's the old iMac of my son, 2002. And up until 2006, Apple didn't use Intel CPUs. So this is an IBM PowerPC G4 CPU with 800 megahertz. It has 512 megabytes of RAM and has an NVIDIA GeForce 2MX graphics card with 32 megabytes of VRAM. So quite old. It's a 60 gigabyte spinning hard disk in there, so very, very vintage. As Apple transitioned to Intel CPUs in 2006, macOS 10.6 Snow Leopard was the first one that required an Intel CPU. So that answers the question, how far can you upgrade this iMac? This one is macOS X Tiger, so 10.4, and with a hack you could update it to 10.5, but that's it, because 10.6 requires Intel CPU and there's no way to emulate that PowerPC CPUs on an Intel one, so that was it. And when I set it up, because this one is missing the airport card, so it doesn't have any Wi-Fi, but I can connect it to the internet via cable. I downloaded all the updates, and that's the first info. The update servers are still alive and you can download the latest updates. So I updated it to macOS X 10.4.11. That's the latest version of Tiger, the latest official one this can run. And then some security updates showed up. Some Java updates and an update for Safari. But anyways, as it's mentioned here, that is copyright and trademark up until 2007 from Apple. That's now basically is an iMac in 2007 with a hardware from 2002, so 5-year-old hardware, and that's it. So basically you are on a 2007, so like a 17-year-old PC. But now let's check what other things are still working, are long forgotten, or are not working. So as you can see here, that is Mac OS X, as it was called then, 10.4.11. And if you click on software update, it is connected to the internet. It does find the Apple update servers. So here it says your software is up to date, and this at least works. Let's start the activity monitor, and that is the one that I'd like to show you, because the downside of that vintage old Macs is memory and the CPU speed. Here you can find what is using the CPU most. So right now it's only 5% usage, and here you can see the memory distribution. It has 512 megabytes, and the green is the free megabytes, okay, the free RAM. It's 170 megabytes free right now. So when we start Safari, and you can see that also down here, it cannot open the Apple page due to it cannot use HTTPS. So maybe if we go to the iTunes releases, yeah, this works, but there's no articles. That is a very old Apple page. Apple Hot News, that is an RSS feed, okay, and when we go to the Apple page, that doesn't work. Let's try Amazon, and you can see it's loading Amazon, the Amazon page, but that doesn't really look like an Amazon page that you can use. As you can see, there are only some pictures of Amazon, but yeah, that is nothing you really can make any use out of it. Let's go to Yahoo. Yahoo is loading. Okay, there are some pictures, some text. So this looks like a little bit of a usable website. But I don't think like features like login or cookies or anything will work on that very old browser. But let's quit Safari. There is a project that's called TenFourFox, and I start this browser, which is basically a Firefox version for PowerPC Macs. Unfortunately, TenFourFox was the development was ended in 2021. But as you can see, this looks like a modern browser, okay? But have a look over here, the green it gets less and less. It's only 18 megabytes of free RAM left, and there's only one tab open and no website. But let's try apple.com. The Google search does work, and here we can go to Apple's website. Let's check if that might work. But as you can see, the speed is really bad, and now it crashed because of not enough memory. You could see the green part went smaller and smaller, and then it crashed due to running out of memory. There was only one web page. So let's start it again. And maybe we try Amazon. And have a look down here on the memory indicator, the green one. It's getting less and less. Okay, that seems like an Amazon web page. and we have 8 megabytes of free RAM. Now it's 13, so it's really a close call, but this looks like a web page you maybe could use. I don't know if login and everything works, but as you can see, I'm scrolling through that web page and it's so slow, because we can see here the CPU is already at 76%. We can go here and have a look at the CPU that's nearly maxed out when we just have a single page open for browsing. So let's close the browser, and then you can see that when it's closed, the CPU goes down, the free memory is back, so that works. So maybe if you go to the Finder and we go to Applications, you have a little idea how that old macOS looked. And maybe we just go to the App Store, and as you can see, there is no App Store. There's just iTunes, which is long deprecated, and it's into Apple Music. The iTunes Music Store, but unfortunately it cannot connect to the music store. So as you can see, that is not really useful as a daily driver. I recommend just connecting it once to the internet to do all the updates, and then stay in your vintage bubble between 2002 and maybe up to 2008, 9, 10. If you have that old software that runs on those old PowerPC Macs, because if you connect it to the internet, if you're using it for browsing, the browser is old and has security issues, doesn't support new features, the CPU is maxed out, the RAM is maxed out, it will crash, it will not be usable. Any cheap smartphone will do a million times better than this one. And so if that might be useful for software up until 2007, 8, 9, 10, let's switch to the iMac 2011, which is the latest that I don't recommend using macOS Ventura or Sonoma, and see what you can do with that. Now let's jump 9 years ahead to the iMac 2011. And in the comments of my videos, there are a lot of you using MacBooks Pro and iMacs like 2010 or 11 and asking what is the best macOS, can I install a newer one, can I still use it as a daily driver? And the latest official for this one here is macOS High Sierra 10.13, and there's one important change after that, because macOS High Sierra is the last macOS that doesn't require a Metal capable graphics card. Metal is an API from Apple to communicate with the graphics card. Okay, how macOS and the apps and games and everything communicate with the graphics card. And Metal is kind of graphic acceleration, but the graphics card has to have the feature set for Metal to be able to understand it. And since macOS Mojave, that was 10.14, the one after High Sierra, macOS itself required a Metal capable graphics card. Fortunately, the guys from the OpenCore development team could make it possible that you install a newer macOS on these old non-Metal Macs. But the graphics card always has to use their old feature set to handle the Metal requests. Okay, so that is like if you have to calculate big numbers, but you don't have the calculator, you have to do it in your mind. Okay, so it's really slow and not all features work. And that is one of the reasons why I personally don't recommend Ventura or Sonoma on these old non-metal Macs. But one step back, let's start with High Sierra. So if you don't want to install an unsupported macOS, you have macOS High Sierra here. It runs really snappy and nice because the graphics card understands all the commands and there's no metal in between. When I go about this Mac, you see 10.13.6. That was the last High Sierra version. This one is already an upgraded iMac with 8 GB of RAM. And if you click on software update, you can see all the updates that I already installed. There was an iTunes device support update, Safari update, iTunes update, and security updates for 2020. And if I just say store reload page here, it's searching for new updates, but it won't find any because I already installed all of them. So same here as with the old iMac, it has still connection to the update servers. This one has Wi-Fi. Obviously, there are no updates, and so this is on a security level of 2020. And that's 4 years old. So there might be some security issues with macOS High Sierra if you use that iMac connected to the internet, because there are no security fixes since 4 years. That's one part. But if you go into the App Store, it works. Okay, if you just want to download Numbers, we click on Numbers, that works. We say get, install app, and it says Numbers can't be installed on Macintosh HD, that's the hard disk, because macOS version 13 or later is required. So the downside of still using macOS High Sierra is that you cannot download apps from the App Store because they require a newer macOS. In this case, they require Ventura. But if you are logged in and you click on Purchased, you can see there's Numbers. And if I say install, it asks, shall I download an older version of Numbers? The current version requires macOS 13 or later, and you can download the last compatible version with macOS High Sierra. So if I say download right now, it starts downloading and it installs Numbers. So all the apps that you purchased way then, you can download in an older version that still run on High Sierra here. But you cannot purchase or download newer apps that you haven't had before, because they most likely will require macOS 12, 13 or 14. And when you go to the Launchpad, there's Numbers, it's installing, so you can use it for that. Let's just go to the Safari while the other is installing, and when I go to the Apple website, you can see the Vision Pro ad here. If we click on the MacBook, the website works. All the features, so the Safari is not that old. Numbers is installed. Let's go here. If we click on Numbers, create a spreadsheet, and we just choose a blank one, there it is. So the old apps that you download do work as well. And funny thing here, if you look, the icon of Numbers has changed quite a bit to the actual one that looks more like an iPhone app, but this one just had the different colored bars here. And maps still work, satellite pictures, everything is working. And so you can use that 12-year-old iMac as a daily driver, but be aware of maybe the security issues with an 4-year-old macOS that hasn't had any security updates since 2020. And you cannot download or install new apps from the App Store if you haven't had them before. So is it useful as a daily driver? Yes, it is. If you just use it for browsing, emails, that's totally fine. And now comes the question, does it make sense to install a newer macOS on that 2011 iMac? And that is something we have to talk about a little bit more in depth. So what's the problem, Jesse? You always tell us, okay, that Macs like 2011 and older, no Ventura, no Sonoma, what's the problem with that? And that is what I'd like to explain. With macOS 11 Big Sur, Apple had the first macOS that was running on Apple Silicon, M1 chips. And then they went on to Monterey, that was macOS 12, Ventura, that was 13, and Sonoma, that was 14, or actually is 14 since it's the latest one. And since macOS 12 Monterey, for instance, the Apple MapKit requires Metal as well. We already talked about Metal starting in macOS 10.14 Mojave for the macOS itself, but there were very few features that needed that. So that was the reason that, for instance, DOSDude could create some patchers for macOS 10.14 Mojave and for 10.15 Catalina to enable those two macOSs to run on non-Metal Macs, because the patcher of DOSDude, and by the way, you find the link to his homepage and the download for all the patchers down in the video description, the patchers just skipped the check of the installer if the Mac is an officially supported Mac. With macOS Big Sur, there was OpenCore and the OpenCore legacy patcher, and then they started to implement root patches. And root patches add drivers that Apple has dropped back to the macOS. So OpenCore emulates a supported Mac that it just installs and boots up, and the root patch just adds missing drivers so that the old hardware still has drivers in new macOSs to be able to run, like Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, graphic cards, and so on. Since macOS 12 Monterey, the MapKit requires Metal as well, and if on a non-Metal Mac like this one here, 2011, in Monterey, Ventura, and Sonoma, you don't have any maps. Not in the Maps app, not in the Weather app, not in the Photos app where the locations are shown. Any app that uses map features doesn't work on these old Macs, Monterey and newer. So then my recommendation is for these old Macs to use macOS Big Sur with the OpenCore legacy patcher. And so if you would upgrade this iMac here to Big Sur, and here is my tutorial, the easiest tutorial to update your unsupported Mac, and that works with Big Sur, Monterey, Ventura, or Sonoma. You would leap forward 3 years because you go from High Sierra to Mojave, Catalina, Big Sur. So you have a 3-year younger macOS. And macOS Big Sur, Apple stopped delivering security updates last year, so it's only 1 year of not getting security updates. But as you saw here with the App Store, most of the apps already require macOS 13 Ventura. So you have the same problem with macOS Big Sur. You cannot download new apps you have to have them before so you can download the older version. So does it make sense to install Big Sur on these Macs? Maybe. That depends what you're doing. If you like to have some new features that macOS Big Sur has, instead of High Sierra, if you like to have 3 years of security updates more, then it basically makes sense to use OpenCore to update that old Macs to Big Sur. But there are some more things that I recommend. Starting also with Big Sur, I recommend more than 4 GB of RAM. Fortunately, with that old Macs, you can update the RAM. There's just a little slot below the screen here, and you can just pull out the old RAM, update it with new ones, or if there are some slots open, you can just add some RAM. As I did here, this one has 8 GB of RAM. And I really recommend 8 GB to run Big Sur on newer. Second, same that I did here, you can open up this iMac quite easily because the glass is not glued. You can just use a suction cup, get the glass off, and there are so many tutorials like with iFixit or wherever, how you can just get this iMac apart and change the hard disk, the spinning hard disk, to an SSD. And that's the next thing that I really recommend if you go higher than High Sierra, which is a nice thing to remember, higher than High Sierra. Do not install that on a spinning disk. Use an SSD or an NVMe, whichever your Mac supports. Otherwise, the loading times and the general handling will be so slow because Big Sur is never meant to be installed officially on a spinning hard disk. So that was it with the very old Macs. Next video, and so don't forget to subscribe, click the bell for notifications so you don't miss it, is the Macs 2012 and younger, and I start with the Mac Pro cheese grater and the Mac Pro trash can from 2013. What you can do with them, what and how can you upgrade, what makes sense to upgrade. Does it make sense, for instance, in the cheese grater to put like a 4 NVMe RAID drive with PCI Express in it, and all the other ideas that you can read in the forums. So let's talk about the MacPros in the next video, and thank you so much for watching. See you soon. Bye bye.